Since the onset of Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24, 2022, multiple battlefronts have opened up in the region, triggering a conflict that has deeply affected both the military forces and civilian populations of both countries. One of the most strategic and decisive areas in this war has been the border region of Belgorod, a Russian city near the Ukrainian border, which has become a key point for Russia's logistical and military operations. Belgorod has not only served as a base for launching attacks on Ukraine, but has also borne the brunt of Ukrainian reprisals, shaping the ongoing dynamics of the war. In the early months of the invasion, the Russian military used Belgorod as a platform to try and capture the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, a key metropolis in northeastern Ukraine. Control of Kharkiv would have provided Russia with a significant strategic advantage, as the city is not only an industrial and technological hub, but also a transit point for military and energy supplies. However, Ukrainian forces, equipped with advanced anti-tank systems and supported by Western-supplied drones, were able to repel the Russian assault, inflicting significant losses and preventing the Russians from breaking through the city's defenses. This initial failure temporarily weakened the morale of Russian forces on the Belgorod front and stalled Russia's attempts to advance deeper into Ukraine from this region. However, the relative calm that followed this setback did not last long. As the conflict intensified, Ukraine began conducting more aggressive operations against Russian bases and supply lines in Belgorod. One of the most critical moments occurred during the summer of 2023, when Ukrainian forces, employing precision airstrikes and long-range artillery, launched a series of raids on Russian military bases in the region. Notably, the use of drones, which had already proven to be a key element in Ukraine's defense, became central to the raids on Belgorod. Armed drones enabled Ukraine to precisely target Russian assets, including ammunition depots, command centers, and military airfields from which Russia was launching missiles and drones into Ukraine. One of the most impactful attacks took place at the Novaya Tabolchanka military base near Belgorod, where a Russian barracks was destroyed by a Ukrainian airstrike. The destruction of this barracks not only caused a large number of casualties among Russian troops but also forced Moscow to reorganize its forces in the region and evacuate several units to safer areas. Belgorod's military airports, which Russia used as launching points for Iskander ballistic missiles and Shahid-136 drones, were also repeatedly attacked, further complicating Russia's ability to maintain its offensive in northeastern Ukraine. As Ukrainian attacks intensified, Russia's logistical and military capacity in the Belgorod region began to be severely compromised, which in turn affected military operations on other fronts of the war. The psychological impact of these attacks cannot be understated. For Russian forces, who had previously operated in Belgorod with relative calm, the growing threat of Ukrainian raids and bombings within their own territory led to a decline in morale. Many Russian soldiers stationed in Belgorod began expressing frustration at the lack of defensive preparedness in the region and at the increasing perception that the conflict, which the Kremlin initially presented as a quick and successful special operation, was far from over. The attacks on Belgorod also sent a clear message to the Russian civilian population, who until then had largely lived unaffected by the war. Explosions and bombings on Russian soil began to generate a sense of vulnerability and fear among citizens in the border areas, who had not expected to be directly impacted by the conflict. Meanwhile, Ukraine also launched a series of bold ground operations that brought the war directly into Russian territory. In late 2023, a group of Ukrainian special forces, supported by Chechen volunteers opposed to Putin's regime, crossed the border and carried out a raid in the Belgorod region. During this operation, Ukrainian commandos temporarily occupied several villages on the outskirts of the city, inflicting significant casualties on Russian forces and disrupting supply and communication lines. Although Russian troops eventually regained control of these areas after intense fighting, the fact that Ukrainian forces could operate with relative ease on Russian soil highlighted weaknesses in Russia's border defenses and sent a chilling signal to the Kremlin about Ukraine's ability to strike beyond its borders. These developments on the Belgorod front have not only impacted the war in military terms, but have also generated political and social repercussions within Russia. Internal pressure on President Vladimir Putin has increased significantly since the war began, and battlefield defeats, combined with international economic sanctions, have heightened tensions within Russia's political and military elite. Despite the Kremlin's efforts to maintain a narrative of control and success, news of military casualties, the destruction of key military infrastructure, and Ukraine's growing resistance could not be entirely concealed. The increasing insecurity in areas like Belgorod and Kursk has fostered a sense of uncertainty among the Russian population, which had initially been misled by government propaganda promising a swift and decisive victory. The growing discontent within Russia has also begun to manifest in the political sphere. Following the March 2024 presidential elections, in which Putin secured an overwhelming victory with 88% of the vote, criticism began to emerge about the legitimacy of the results and the transparency of the electoral process. Several political analysts pointed out that the elections were marred by allegations of fraud and manipulation, further undermining confidence in Putin's leadership. As the war drags on and Western sanctions continue to strangle the Russian economy, even some sectors of the ruling elite have begun to question the viability of continuing the invasion of Ukraine without seeking a diplomatic solution. Amid this landscape, one figure who has emerged as a critical voice is Oleg Deripaska, one of Russia's most influential oligarchs. In a recent interview, Deripaska openly expressed his opposition to the war, calling it a disaster and suggesting that Russia should seek a negotiated exit from the conflict. His comments reflect growing discontent among Russian oligarchs, many of whom have seen their assets frozen abroad and face travel restrictions due to international sanctions. These economic pressures, combined with increasing military difficulties on the front lines, are beginning to fracture unity within the Kremlin and fueling speculation about potential leadership changes if the situation continues to deteriorate. As the conflict progresses, Ukrainian forces have also demonstrated an impressive capacity to innovate tactically and exploit the weaknesses of Russian forces. One example has been the use of FPV, first-person view, drones by Ukrainian Special Operations Units. These remotely controlled drones, equipped with explosives, have been used with great effectiveness to destroy Russian artillery systems, including modern Tu-19 Stu-S howitzers, which had been a key component of Russia's arsenal on the battlefield. Ukraine's ability to neutralize these systems has significantly weakened Russia's offensive capabilities in several regions, forcing the Kremlin to withdraw some of its forces to more defensive positions. In Luhansk, for instance, Russian forces have attempted to advance southwest toward the border with Kharkiv, but have encountered fierce resistance from Ukrainian troops, who have used both advanced Western weaponry and guerrilla tactics to hold their positions. Intelligence reports have indicated that the Russians have lost a considerable amount of heavy military equipment on this front, including tanks, armored vehicles, and artillery, which has stalled their ability to launch an effective offensive.